When there is harmonious integration centered around the sun, then there is the appropriate attitude towards the world. And on the moon, the appropriate attitude to the constellations. And on the pole star, the appropriate attitude to its course. Now, Sutras 26 to 34 are specific applications of samyama, translated here as harmonious integration. And I think it's important to take Sutras 26 to 34 as a paragraph, because each sutra from 27 onwards begins with a conjunction, and so I've ended each sutra with a semicolon. Now, Patanjali is presenting us with a very choice morsel here. It's something which needs to be unlocked. I remember as a child, I bought a set of very old encyclopedias in a second-hand bookshop, and there was a picture in one of the volumes which made a huge impression on me. I can't remember what the entry was, but it was a picture, a black and white picture of a meditating yogi who followed a particular practice, and it was the practice of staring at the sun. And what had happened, what was revealed in this picture, was that this yogi's eyes had burned out. He had no eyeballs. He was still staring at the sun, but he had no eyes to see it with anymore. They'd burnt out over time. It was quite a shocking thing to see and to read about, although there was something odd about the picture. He had a smile on his face. He seemed, even in this old black and white photograph, something peaceful came across. Apparently there was a cult of sun gazers, and this is what they did. He wasn't unique. I haven't done any research on this. It might be worth having a look at it. But I wonder if this particular cult had been influenced by this sutra of Patanjali's or some other similar information. When there is harmonious integration centered around the sun, then there is the appropriate attitude towards the world. So is that what this sutra is telling us? Direct your attention to the sun. Absorb yourself in staring at the sun. And what I've translated here as appropriate attitude is normally translated as knowledge. So if you stare at the sun, you're going to get knowledge about the world. Knowledge of the entire world. Now, if you want to take this literally, I suspect you might be disappointed, although I can't speak for the person in that photograph I saw. Perhaps he had reached some state of absorption which felt good, but that's not the way of wisdom. This isn't what it's about. And as I mentioned in the previous video, to really understand what Sutras 26 to 34 are about, we need to prepare ourselves with Sutras 21 to 25. Sutras 21 talk about suspending the power of the eye, and Sutra 25 tells us to give up the inclination to follow the light. So if you're not following the light, how can you focus on the sun? So quite clearly, Patanjali is not talking about the sun. he is using this word. And we have to understand it in a way which, first of all, relates to the context of the sutras, and secondly, relates to our immediate experience. So what are our options here in finding out what Patanjali means when he talks about the sun? Well, you could refer to your yogic texts, your books of yoga philosophy, pranayama and kundalini and all that. And that's what people often do. But in this approach to the sutras, to find out what Patanjali is talking about, we're looking directly at the immediate experiencing. Because whatever Patanjali is talking about is to do with that. Patanjali is not giving us knowledge in a conceptual sense. So to understand this sutra as a bit of information is perhaps looking at it in what we could call an exoteric light. But there's another level here, what we might call the esoteric level, which is actually much simpler. Let's go for the simple option rather than make it complicated. The simple option is to look at the immediate experiencing and also the context of the sutras, especially the sutras that have come before. So it's quite clear Patanjali is not talking about the sun in the conventional sense of the term. And in fact, in Sutra 25, the previous sutra, he says to have the appropriate attitude to that which is subtly hidden and distant. I would suggest that what he means by subtly hidden is all that stuff to do with the philosophy of yoga, to do with all that stuff about psychic channels or whatever. So the appropriate attitude is always to come back to the immediate experiencing, which is samadhi. So, we must ask ourselves then, what does he mean by the sun? Well, what is the chief function of the sun in terms of the immediate experiencing? Well, the sun is what casts light. The sun is that by which things come into awareness. Sutras 26, 27 and 28 are all concerned with the sources of light, the sun, the moon and the stars. And in this sense, we don't need to exclusively associate light with sight. Light is simply here, the sun here is simply the power of awareness, consciousness. So, when there is harmonious integration centered around the sun, and this is samyama, being concentrated consistently in samadhi, being focused and established in samadhi, then there is the appropriate attitude towards the world. And this is what all the previous sutras have been leading up to. The appropriate attitude towards the world is we are not sucked into it. Awareness is not hijacked by it. We do not take it as reality anymore. So that seems quite straightforward actually. When we're in samadhi, when we're established in it, this is the light of awareness. This is our sun. This is the orbit around which we revolve. It's now our gravitational center. The world, conventional reality, no longer has any pull. Sutra 27 talks about the moon, another source of light. We've got the appropriate attitude to the constellations. Again, we're not talking about the physical moon or the constellations, the arrangements of the stars. We're not interested in constellations and the arrangements of the stars. But there's a clue here. what are the constellations? Aquarius, the Big Dipper, Orion. These constellations are constructed patterns. These patterns are constructed by the cognitive mind. So this is what we have to be aware of. The cognitive mind. The mind that creates patterns, that creates structures, that discerns things, that collects and gathers things and puts them into sets. The intellect. This is the mind that makes sense of things so that we can talk about things. So this is what we've got. We've got the sun and the moon. We've got pure awareness, and we've got the cognitive mind. The cognitive mind's got this tendency, this urge to probe the subtly hidden and distant, as mentioned in Sutra 25. So we become aware, we focus on our cognitive inclinations, and we realize that all these structures that we call the world are created by this aspect of consciousness, the cognitive aspect of consciousness. So we don't take it as real. We don't take the constellations as real. And in the same way, we don't take any of the divisions and categories of the physical world as real, because they're no more real than the constellations. And on the pole star, the appropriate attitude to its course. This is sometimes translated as the appropriate attitude to the course of the stars. It might be that, but I think it's also possible to translate this in terms of the course of the pole star. So now we've got the pole star. And what is this in the immediate experiencing? Well, the pole star marks that axis about which the celestial sphere revolves. And we can understand the celestial sphere as everything. So the pole star is that around which everything revolves. And of course, it doesn't move. This is its course, its stillness. So the appropriate attitude to its course is the realization of stillness, around which everything is moving. So we could take this as our center of being. Again, this is samadhi. We are still, we are centered, and everything else is revolving around this axis which is our center of being.